This is Chris Dykes from Lost City Knits and its subsidiary, Project HandWork. Project HandWork is a photography series that I began in February of 2019, running a calendar year until this last February. And what I was doing is photographing just people's hands at events that we attended, honestly, from coast to coast and from border to border almost. I isolated the hands just with a black backdrop, and I only used one black backdrop for hundreds of photos. That sounds different now than it did a year ago. And I had flashes, putting light on people's hands. I do some editing and make the blacks blacker, makes the colors pop a little bit. And I just wanted to see the shapes and variety of, of, of work. What I did not anticipate was that I was, in my way, talking about discussions that were already going on in the fiber and knitting community about inclusion. I did not intend to address this, but once I saw a day's worth of photos on my screen, I realized, oh, this is not about individual photos. This is about a community and individuals within that community. We have manicures. We have garden dirt under fingernails. We have tattoos. We have Rolexes. We have all the skin tones. We have men, women, Republicans, Democrats, gay, straight. But what happened when I removed the usual things that we put out in front of others? Our hair, our face, our clothes, and just focused on the work that our elemental tools are doing is also some commonality. Everyone is working on something, different skill levels naturally, but everyone is compelled to work on something. Now, I don't knit. I'm compelled to do other things. Denise is compelled to knit. So, what I want to do here is run a slideshow of several dozen of the hundreds of photos that I've taken. Have a look. Maybe you're in this slideshow. I don't know. But people who make their living in the knitting industry are here. The vast majority of photos here are of people who maybe get an hour in on the weekends. Have a look, see what you see, and think about the differences that we have from one another, and importantly, the commonalities. Denise and I will both provide some narration. I'll tell some stories of my observations, and Denise will read some stories that have been sent to me over the past year. Thank you. I, of course, approached these photos from a photography standpoint, not a knitting standpoint. It wasn't until knitters started to see the photos that I noticed that they were noticing how people carried their yarn. I'd never considered that. And then a knitter came in the booth, was looking around at the photos, pointed to one and said, "That's a surgeon." And I said, "Yeah, you're right, that is a surgeon, but how did you know?" She said, "Well, I work with doctors and I'm a rehabilitative nurse. I see all kinds of trauma and joint injuries. I can see all kinds of things." "Well, like what?" I said. She looked around. "Well, we have some diabetes developing here. Oh, this is some kind of burn trauma. There's some arthritis developing." I knew she was right about some of these things. Others I had no idea because I don't have her training. It all depends on what lens you look through.
My best friend Jane, who showed me what a sister could be, taught me how to knit. She died of leukemia several years ago. From her hands to mine, she gave me the gift of creating knitted garments for those I love. My current project is knitting a very special scarf for my nephew. He picked the colors, and I'm making it out of 100% cashmere using the Fibonacci math formula. My nephew is a math geek. He's going through a very difficult time and sometimes feels deeply alone. Being able to create this scarf for him, made by my hands, thinking of him each time my hands finish a stitch, and then giving him a hand-knit scarf that he can wrap around himself to keep warm in the extremely cold Utah winters, is a gift I can never repay Jane. I hope for him it becomes a symbol of how much he is loved. I don't have pretty hands. My fingers are short and stubby, but I am forever grateful that God sent Jane to me and that he gave me these hands to pass her gift on.
Sometimes I ask a subject if they would remove their wristwatch, but a woman came by and she had a Mickey Mouse watch on, and I thought to myself, I think this is important. And right then, as if on cue, she said, make sure this watch is in the photo. My husband gave this to me about 25 years ago, and I lost him 25 years ago.
My family has generations of knitters and crocheters, and as a child I wanted to learn to do both, but the left-handed women in my family told me they couldn't teach me. 10 years later, I moved in with a roommate who knitted and crocheted. I sat on the floor beside her while she taught me. These hands have helped aging parents, held 3 beautiful children, assisted others, and worked 40 years in accounting. The community of knitters and crocheters is amazing if you give it a try.
A middle-aged mother and then her daughter, who was in her 20s, maybe 30, came by. The mother was enthusiastic about sitting for a photo, and the daughter was a little bit less so. But she was persuaded by her mother. As she arranged herself, she put her knitting bag into what would be the frame. I suggested that maybe she put that on the ground because it would be simpler without the knitting bag. She said, no, I want that there. My husband bought this for me the year before he died.
I'm a colorectal surgeon. I first started knitting when my daughters were very young. During a visit to the library, I found Nikki Epstein's Crochet for Barbie doll book. My mother-in-law, who is a wonderful knitter, saw me obsessively crocheting doll clothes, toys, and amigurumi, and taught me how to knit. She bought me some basic books, which I devoured. Learning how to pick up stitches and to repair was an epiphany. As a parent, I found that knitting allowed me to call on a well of infinite patience. When my daughters asked me to read their favorite books, I found that I loved to do so no matter how many times we had gone through the same story, if I could also knit while reading. I was welcomed into a fabulous community of knitters who helped me every step along the way. We meet regularly and we elevate each other with our collective experience, inspiration, and creativity. Because I reduced my working hours after my children were born, I consider myself to be a full-time knitter and a part-time surgeon.
A young guy came in the booth and was looking at the photos. I gave him a minute, and then I asked if he wanted to sit for a photo. Yeah, he said. Oh, but wait. And then he held up his hands, which revealed several tattoos. So what? I said. That's your story, isn't it? And he said, yeah, this is my story. And then he began rummaging through his knitting bag looking for the right project to use.
When we first started dating, she picked up knitting again after learning it from her mom as a child. She knew I knit and wanted to get better to impress me. These photos were taken within a couple of months of us getting engaged. It is wonderful to have something that shows our rings and also highlights one of the crafts that helped bring us together.
She tells me, after chatting about the photos on display, that when she was 4, someone intentionally scalded her hands with boiling water, and that she had spent a month wrapped in bandages. As a child, she always associated her hands with pain. That she now wears and creates jewelry for the hands speaks to a continuing recovery. It seems important that I do this, she says, sitting for a photograph. I tell her she is trusting me with a lot. We do the photos, and as she gets up, we shake hands. That doesn't seem sufficient, so we hug for a moment before we part and go about our days, as if something remarkable hadn't just occurred. I hadn't noticed. Maybe I would have when I went to edit the photo, but I was too distracted by her vivaciousness and her white lace draping down to the ground. She unhesitatingly launched into a story. I've lost part of my finger, she said. I was sailing. It was a perfectly nice day, not too windy. I went to change a sail and something caught. Just like that, it was gone. She showed me an abbreviated finger. I'm not going to lie. My first thought was a four-letter word, but so was my second. Can I still knit? I used to enter speed knitting contests and would win. After this, I entered and I still won. I think it makes me more aerodynamic.